I'm Robert. He's Jason, coming to you with a fun question here on Friday morning. Which American soccer district would be the most interesting American region to build an origin team a la Chivas or Bilbao? You can compare this to maybe the State of Origin rugby series in Australia or the Gaelic Games in Ireland, where you get to represent a team that would be from players from your region of the
Yeah.
country. There's
Yeah.
a few different to play with, and we definitely want to get the comments going here.
Yes.
Which state or region of the United States would build the most interesting American origin team?
Yeah, I think we need to throw out a couple of caveats here, right? So one of them is, as far as I'm aware, under American law, you would not be able to do this. You would not be able to actually put out a club or have a club that only signs players from a certain place. I think that is discrimination and probably wouldn't fly. But the idea is like, yes, like Athletic Bilbao or Athletic Club, technically speaking, or Chivas de Guadalajara. What would be a team that kind of fits this idea of identity being central to who that club is? And, sometimes American soccer fans like to play this game of which state would have the best team if we did a state of origin, like the rugby series you mentioned in Australia. Like if we had a New Jersey sort of national team or a California national team or whatever, who would win, right? And people love that. And that's out there, and you can find it all over the internet. I think American soccer Reddits are like half that at this point in history. But I thought, hey, let's extrapolate that out a little bit more. And just as a thought experiment, imagine if a club did want to be like Guadalajara, which Guadalajara's policy is solo mexicano, right? Solo mexicano means you have to be eligible for the Mexican national team. Now, they've played with that a little bit. Now, you look at Cade Cowell, who has Mexican heritage and is eligible but plays for the United States of America. That used to not even be possible, right? That used to be, they would not even sign you if you weren't going to represent Mexico internationally. So things have drifted for them just a little bit. And I think Bilbao is interesting too, Athletic Bilbao, because I think the idea of Basque players, people have a concept of what that is. And it's no longer about ethnicity. It's just about location or origin, where you are from. And think about the Williams brothers are a good example. They're Basque by origin, therefore they are eligible. They are players that Athletic Bilbao will sign. So if we do it that way, I mean, the first place we have to go, Robert, is Texas, right? Nobody in America thinks of themselves as their state or their local identity more than Texans do, right? They're more that than they are Americans sometimes.
When you floated this idea, this was the first one that came to mind immediately, just with the amount of talented players that come from there, and then like you said, that independent mindset. I mean, at one point Texas was its own country, and
Yeah.
people haven't that is baked into lore and culture there.
Yeah, if Texas did secede, which who knows what's possible in 2025. If Texas did secede from the United States of America, then one of their clubs could do this. FC Dallas could choose to be just Texan players, and you have to be from Texas, right? And obviously you can look through the annals and talk about the players that Ricardo Pepi and Jesus Herrera and Clint Dempsey, all Texan, and that's just three off the top of my head, but all of those players Texan by background, by origin, by birth, and therefore they would be eligible for a team that was only about signing Texan players. After that, it gets a little more interesting in trying to figure out where the borders would lie, right? Like you could just pick states, but I don't think, like, to me, a California team that only signs Californians is not as interesting as, say, a Southern California team that's like, you know what, we're drawing a line. And if you're too far north, if from too far north, you can't play for us. Like, that would be interesting. Maybe you even include Baja California just to make it more interesting too. You could have a little chunk of Mexico be eligible for the California teams, the Southern California team.
Yeah, that's a pretty fun concept to toy with, and like what areas kind of have that magnetism to where people want to claim to be from that region. Like,
Right.
does Baja like make you want to be specifically from there? And like, what place would draw somebody to like maybe consider leaving their current situation to like the yearn to represent their city, district, or state? It's just so strong that they would step
Right.
away from
So,
their current setup.
and I'm going to ask, and I don't know if we have any Californians watching the show right now, but maybe after the fact when the video goes up, people can respond in the comments. Like, if you're from Bakersfield, do you count for a Southern California team. Like, I'm not Californian. I technically am. I was born in Sacramento, even though I've not lived there at any other point in my life except for the 2 months I was there when I was born. I don't know if I would be eligible for California, any team, maybe the NorCal team, but not the SoCal team, I guess, is what my situation would be, right? So again, where's the line? Like, Fresno is definitely Northern California, but Bakersfield is maybe not. Somebody can help me out with that. I like Nate here. So we talked about this before the show when we were setting this up. Chicago. A Chicagoland team would be very interesting. Now, how big is that? Do Gary, Indiana, does that count? Is that part of the deal?
That's the outskirts of Chicagoland. I think that's the if you're coming from Michigan and you're traveling to Chicago, when you hit Gary, you know you're in the outer bubble of Chicagoland.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, I'm going to come back. So he's got SoCal and New Jersey and Texas. Okay, that's great. And then he says Bakersfield is Inland Empire. Bakersfield is absolutely not Inland Empire as far as my understanding of the Inland Empire is. That would be San Bernardino and Riverside and where my buddy Jared Dubois is from, which is Ontario. That is Inland Empire. And an idea for an Inland Empire only team is interesting too if you know the history of players from that part of the country. So, and on the men's side and on the women's side. And by the way, we're leaving this open. You could actually absolutely do this with a women's club, and it could be interesting too. But Alex Morgan is from the Inland Empire. Landon Donovan, Carlos Bocanegra, Clay Koyman. I'm missing like 10 other guys, 10 other players, pretty famous professionals who come from the Inland Empire. So yeah, I think that one would be certainly interesting to me. Somebody said Jersey. I believe our man Nicholas Murray threw out Jersey. Now, would that be all of New Jersey, or would it be North Jersey, South Jersey? You got.
Oh, we're
Jersey
getting that granular there.
Well, I'm just wondering because if a team came in and said, we're a Philly team, right? See, this is the thing about the Philadelphia Union. Now they have players from all over the world and players from other parts of the country, but they're very proud to have their academy products from the Philadelphia Union Academy. And some of those kids are Jersey kids. The Aronson family are Jersey kids. They're not Pennsylvanians. They're from South Jersey, across the river. So if you were like, oh, the Philadelphia identity is what we want to bring to this club, then if you are from the suburbs across the river in New Jersey, are you still Philly? Like, do you still count for this? Right? You know what I'm saying? It's very interesting to think about. Because somebody like Carly Lloyd. Carly Lloyd is from New Jersey, but she's not a New York sports person. She's a Philadelphia sports person.
Yeah. We'd have to really narrow it down to see, is it where you're from or where you're at, sort of
Just
a question.
Draw a big circle. I mean, obviously you could do this with radius, right? There's a point that you decide is the center of your circle, and you draw a big circle. This is obviously how MLS teams were doing or still are, I guess, in terms of academy players and who they can bring into their academy. You have a catchment area. I guess you could be as specific as that. But again, I think it's more about identity than anything else. And for Chivas, you don't have to be born in Mexico. You just have to be eligible for the Mexican national team. But for Athletic Club, for Bilbao, you have to be from the Basque country. You can't. I don't know. I actually have not looked at their squad list recently to see if are there any players who are born outside of the Basque country. And obviously, we don't have to just do it based on what Bilbao does. But if you are you have to find some way to make a rule, right? The rule is you have to be born in the Chicagoland area, even if you didn't grow up in Chicago or the nearby towns. Like, oh, that still gets you in, or maybe you were born somewhere else and you grew up in Chicago. Does that make it more fitting for this?
Producer Jenny, thrown in some other regions to consider and maybe some notable players. Perhaps a New England squad with Diego Fagundes on the women's side, the Mua sisters, Parkhurst. In Great Lakes, sure. We got Alexi Lala, Steve Clark, Brad Guzan, Michael Bradley, Brian McBride, DeMarcus Beasley, Jesse Marsh. So some folks coming out of the Great Lakes area. That could be very broad.
But this is what I'm saying. Okay, so maybe the rule is if you say "ope" on a regular basis, you are eligible for this team. Is that
That's
what
a
we're
great
doing?
way to narrow it down. That's a perfect way to nail it down. It just classifies the general area.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, it has to be like there has to be an identity marker. So I guess if people do think of themselves as New Englanders, right? I'm a New England. Now, if you're from Maine, you're a Mainer. If you're from Massachusetts, you're a masshole. That's not what they call themselves, but that's still funny.
What everyone else does.
Whatever. You're a Vermonter, right? You're from your state, but in general, you are a New Englander, and you would say that. Now, obviously, there's a line. Like, we kind of all agree that Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, we know what the New England states are, basically, right? We all kind of had like New York, even upstate New York isn't New England, right? Doesn't count. Do we agree on
Does
that?
upstate New York count as New England? Well, I
It
asked you
shouldn't,
a
right?
naive question before we started the show, so I don't know if I'm qualified to
Well, no, but
answer
see, that's
that.
the
But
thing. Your expertise stops with the Midwest. Apparently, that's where your expertise
I
ends.
can name all 50 states, Jason. Come on.
Can you? Okay, well that's good, but you don't know exactly which ones are New England, which ones are not, that kind of thing, right? Again, I don't think New York, any part of New York, is New England. So then New York becomes its own thing, or you have, I don't know. I mean, again,
Oh, Nate's trying to say that there's a clear defined where you're at is where you played your club or high school soccer.
okay, that's interesting. Okay, I could see that being the determining factor. Now, again, we're not trying to make a whole system and multiple. We're just trying to find one idea that kind of makes sense for one club to do. And I still think it's probably going to always come back to Texas because of how strong the Texan identity is. But there are some places where it's like, okay, I'm this thing, and then maybe that thing feeds into the club's identity, a la Chivas or Bilbao.
All right, to put a final stamp on this hypothetical, which area could form a team and compete in the MLS?
So that's SoCal, right? Depending on how wide an area we're talking about. Like if it's Los Angeles and Inland Empire, and then obviously up in the Valley and all that stuff. If you take all that, that's definitely a team that compete. I think all of New Jersey could put a team that, like, okay, compete. Wow, now see, now I'm thinking about it. How would they fare? Probably be last place, right? They'd probably be last place. Whoever we're talking about here.
And you look
Yeah.
at the names that hail from Texas. If it's Texas only, I think they could hang. I really do.
That right now in this, okay, well, but so that's the thing though. Obviously, not every Basque player plays for Bilbao, and not all the best Basque players play for Bilbao. They have a lot of them, and they're having a good season, and they obviously can compete, and they have this baked into their identity. But if you've got Weston McKennie's not coming back from Juve to play for the
I
Texans,
know, but like if we said that Texas Pride, imagine if the Texas Pride just burns in his heart. He leaves Juventus to represent Texas.
maybe he
I
does.
think that he's a good enough player that he alone, if he joined this hypothetical Texas team, I think him alone could make a Texas team relevant.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, if you get Pepe and McKennie, and you mentioned Brian Reynolds before we started the show. I mean, people maybe forgot about him. He's at Westerlo in Belgium, but still a good player. Came out of the Dallas Academy. I mentioned Jesus Ferreira. Who else is from Texas? I mean,
We get Clint Dempsey out of retirement, and
that's what we do. We get Clint out of retirement. Yeah, we might be
maybe
short
Lee
on
Wynn
fullbacks.
can do the same. Jeff Agoose, we take him out of the time machine.
Yeah, I forgot about those. All right, this is an interesting concept. Throw those responses in the comments and let us know what state of origin club might work in America.
If you haven't already joined the MK Ultras, now is your great opportunity to do so. We've gone through 1,000 subscribers. We're working towards 5,000 YouTube subscribers. Morning Kick Around on YouTube.com. If you haven't already clicked the button, do so now and tell your friend to do so immediately after. You can follow along on social media, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. Write us a note to morningkickaround@gmail.com. Accepting some notes about sponsorships and partnerships if you're interested in that as well, or if you want to contribute anything financially, small or large, you can do so. Ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. Thank you to everyone who has already donated, and thank you to future donations as well.